Millions of Israelis forced to take shelter day and night from repeated Iranian missile attacks. The economic shockwaves from the war Israel and the US launched against Iran are being felt across the world. How is it affecting Israel and its future? This is Inside Story. Hello again, I'm James Bays. Iran's attacks have been hitting Israel, evading the David Sling and Iron Dome missile defence systems, frequently touted as the best in the world. A long-time political ambition to attack Iran has become reality for Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu twice during US President Donald Trump's second term. But it's coming at a cost, with attacks on Israel hitting home. The impact of Netanyahu's decision to take Israel to war against Iran is also being felt far beyond the Middle East, posing economic dangers across the globe. So what does this war mean for Israel, its future and its relations with the world? Could the global damage caused by the war against Iran have political consequences for Israel? We'll be joined by a panel of guests in just a moment, but first this report from Laura Khan.
Iranian attacks have penetrated deep into Israel, causing casualties and extensive damage in a country that's for decades touted its multi-layered defence systems. Israel's Iron Dome defence system has been intercepting many missiles, but falling debris is also causing damage. On Tuesday morning, shrapnel hit a building in Tel Aviv, and strikes targeted locations in Haifa in the north, as well as several sites in the south.
One warhead of a missile that exploded in the middle of the road. It's exploded above cars and make a big hole in the ground.
Feels that you're a duck, and waiting to the missiles to hit you or someone next to you.
But it's not the first time attacks have affected areas deep inside Israel. On Sunday in Arad in southern Israel, an Iranian ballistic missile strike devastated an entire neighbourhood. That was after another Iranian attack injured at least 180 people in Dimona, near a major nuclear research centre. Despite the pressure, the latest opinion polls found 9 in 10 Jewish Israelis support the war. But the country is absorbing a heavy cost. Israel had been waging genocide in Gaza. That war, according to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, had extended to several separate fronts. It included Lebanon, where Israel is now intensifying attacks, and the economic cost has also been high. Israel's finance minister warns the war could cost almost $3 billion per week if current red alert restrictions remain in place. That means schools and universities are closed, and anyone working must be close to a shelter. Reserve soldiers are also mobilized. Netanyahu's decision to attack Iran has had a global impact, with rising energy prices. That could mean the political price for Western governments supporting Israel may now be higher than it was a month ago. Laura Khan for Inside Story, Al Jazeera.
Well, let's meet our guests for today's discussion. 3 prominent Israeli experts joining us on Inside Story, and they are Gideon Levy, a columnist at Haaretz newspaper. He joins us from Tel Aviv. In Levy, Greece, Alex Coman, a professor at Holon Institute of Technology and a commentator on economic and political affairs. And also in Tel Aviv, Dan Perry, political analyst and former editor at the Associated Press, who's worked in Europe, the Middle East and Africa. Thank you, all of you, for joining us. Let me start with you, Dan. I mean, the world is watching very closely the developments in recent hours. Trump's diplomacy, or talk of diplomacy, and some being rather sceptical, saying he might just be buying time with the oil and energy markets and waiting while more military assets arrive. What's the feeling there from people in Israel about what's really going on?
To be perfectly honest, I think most Israelis know that it would be foolhardy to try to predict what Trump is going to do, or even to analyze whether or not he's telling the truth or what he could possibly have as his motivation. There is some suspicion that Trump backed down from his threat because of the Iranian counter threats. There is also a general sense in Israel that Trump simply wants to emerge from this a winner, and he cannot afford to appear to have ended the war simply because Iran blocked the Strait of Hormuz. And therefore, some elegant solution is being sought out of this conundrum. The big question really is whether, when the war ends, if the Islamic Republic hasn't collapsed as such, and that seems to be unlikely, though most Israelis would welcome it, then what has it achieved? Will Iran be compelled to abrogate its ambitions with the missiles, with the nukes, and in particular with the militias?
Gideon, let me ask you what you make of what Trump's up to by reading you one, and I have selected this carefully, but one quote from the president. This will be peace for Israel, long-term peace, guaranteed peace if this happens. And then, without pausing at all, he said, and I can't guarantee it. What do you make of what President Trump's up to?
I wish, James, that the aspirations would have been much lower. When he speaks about peace in the Middle East, I lose him, because we were never so far from peace in the Middle East. We were never so far from solving the Palestinian issue, which is the core issue. But still, I have to say that, unlikely many analysts, I tend to believe that we are closer to an agreement. And I hope that an American president does not go so low and spreads all kind of fake news only to get better positions in the negotiations. I really want to believe that Donald Trump got to the conclusion that this war is enough for him. He cannot gain much more, and he's losing from day to day. I hope that this is the mindset, and then we might face an agreement in the very soon days. Once Donald Trump will put an end to the war in Iran, Israel will have to join. Israel does not have any other choice.
Alex, if you look at that phrase that got a previous US president in trouble in 2003, mission accomplished, in terms of where we are militarily, do you think Israel believes its mission accomplished? Because Trump 2 weeks ago said, and I quote, very complete pretty much. And then a week ago, he said 100% of Iran's military capability had been destroyed. And yet, on the Israeli side, the Israeli military have said several more weeks. And in fact, the Israeli chief of staff said only on Saturday that the campaign was midway.
Yeah, very few missions have been accomplished so often. And I'm saying this ironically because Netanyahu and Trump are very similar in the sense that they are both demagogues and they want to state victory time and time again. Trump is very aware of what happens in Wall Street, what happens to the financial markets. The financial markets, ironically, have responded very well to his promises of success. So whenever the oil prices went up and he calmed them, immediately they came down, and then they realized that actually we shouldn't take him too seriously, and they mounted again. And I'm afraid that this is going to happen yet again. So we shouldn't take these statements of victory, success, ultimate, whatever. We should not take them seriously at all.
Dan, I mean, throughout this, whenever he's appeared in front of reporters, Prime Minister Netanyahu has seemed as though he is joined at the hip with President Trump, and he's praised him repeatedly in this joint operation. But do you think from the beginning Israel and the US have had somewhat different goals in all of this, particularly on that key issue of whether there should be regime change?
Yeah, I think the government of Israel has certainly concluded that regime change would be highly desirable. And I think in this regard, rather unusual for the Netanyahu government, they are not misaligned with the Israeli public. I think most Israelis think that the Islamic Republic regime is illegitimate, has threatened them far too much, threatens the Arab world far too much, massacres its own people far too much, and they really do want regime change. They have lost all hope in dealing with his government, rightly or wrongly, whether you think the war is legal or illegal. From the American side, Trump doesn't care about democracy. He explicitly walked away from democracy promotion in the December national security strategy. He seems to be okay with autocracies as long as they are domesticated and do what he wants. There is little evidence that Trump has appetite for doing what's needed to achieve regime change in Iran, which is difficult to contemplate without boots on the ground. I think they toyed with it. They might have suspected that the regime might collapse upon itself in reaction to the original shock of the spectacular February 28th decapitation, but that hasn't happened. And I don't sense that regime change is on a table for the Americans at this point. They would like some sort of arrangement that Trump can spin as a win. And to a certain degree, because just as Professor Coman had said, Netanyahu is no less of a demagogue. I think we can pretty much assume that no matter how the war ends, the Israelis and the Americans will present it as a victory, even if that victory is limited to the weakening of the regime. And of course, the regime has been weakened. There's no doubt about it. Obviously, they've taken out missile launchers and they've attacked more nuclear sites and they've badly battered the Besiege and the IRGC's headquarters, and they've caused damage. And whatever bluster the Iranians produce after the war, there is a reason to believe, or at least to hope, that they've been somewhat cowed and chastened, and perhaps they'll behave a little bit better in the future. But of course, that is in no way guaranteed. What has been made clear is that the Americans have crossed the Rubicon where they've shown a willingness to attack Iran. That was brazen. Some may think it was reckless. But I think it will factor potentially into Iranian behavior in the future. If the war ends right now, all sides will declare victory. The Israelis and Americans will say what I just said, and the Iranians, of course, given that the sum of their ambition is for the regime to stay in power so they can live to oppress their people another day, they will declare victory as well. And I suppose when there is a however fictitious win-win-win on the table in this way, the dynamic may be pushing in that direction.
Gideon, is it not just about different aims, but is there a bigger context here that Israel has a different attitude to war from the United States? Israel is prepared to pay higher costs, both economic and military. Israeli citizens do military service, apart from some who have a religious exemption. The country has, you could say, been on a war footing for all of its existence.
It's much worse than this, because Israel throughout the years, and especially in the last years, sees in many cases a war as a great opportunity, sees a war as a first choice and not the last choice. In Israel, throughout the years, and especially in recent years, it is much easier to launch a war rather than to conduct a diplomatic compromise, a political compromise with any kind of enemy. You can much easier recruit the public opinion to launch another war, third time in Lebanon, fifth time in Gaza, you name it, rather than to try once a diplomatic compromise, diplomacy, negotiations, compromising, giving up some of your positions for the sake of stability. I don't want to use the word peace, but Israel will always choose the war as the first option. And this reached a peak in this war, in which, as it was mentioned by your reporter, 93% of the Jewish Israelis support this war. This is a North Korean figure. In no democracy in the world you get such figures about any question. 93% are supporting the war. This is unbelievable.
Okay, Alex, you wanted to jump in on that. Dan, you can have a word in a moment. Alex first, please.
I beg to differ. It's interesting because Gideon Levy is a big fan of Netanyahu's, but what we've seen is that Netanyahu, over the years, he projected a lot of weakness, whether it was in the north with Hezbollah building tents within Israel, and whether it was with viewing Hamas as an asset and funneling money into Hamas, etc. So Netanyahu right now, it's true about Netanyahu. It's very important for him to wage war and to show that he is not a coward and that he's this feisty leader. But this is the result of his weakness over many, many years.
Let me bring you in, Dan, on these points, because on Netanyahu himself, I mean, you could say this has been a central goal of his entire political career, the longest serving Israeli prime minister in history, and he doesn't want to lose an extraordinary opportunity that he now has to destroy Iran.
To destroy Iran's Islamic Republic, which many people around the world and many Iranian diaspora leaders that I speak to regularly think is a favor to the Iranians. Netanyahu's in an odd position here where he might just potentially be right in the view of most Israelis. He's not accustomed to that. My friend Gideon speaks of the North Korean aspect of 90% support. There are many reasons why you might have 90% support for a thing. One could be, sure, North Korean level indoctrination and fear. Another could be that people are stupid. A third could be that it's true. And you will find that Netanyahu does not have 90% support on his dealings with the Palestinians, where indeed the dynamic is that the Likud and the right wing refuse to compromise. And so Israel's desperately divided on that issue. But when it comes to Iran, when it comes to Hezbollah, when it comes to Iran's other jihadist proxies that have spread chaos, mayhem, misery, and death around the Middle East, I think most Israelis have concluded there is nothing to discuss and no compromise that is possible. And that is why you have this level of support and this willingness to sacrifice. And of course, the Israelis, A, are closer to the facts, and B, closer to the consequences than the Americans are. So as a result of that, they're more willing to sacrifice. The idea, however, is uncomfortable for many Israelis. Netanyahu has minority support in Israel, and trust me, there is cognitive dissonance right now in Israel with people who support the goals of the war, of scaling back the ambitions and abilities of a regime that is committed to jihad, but uncomfortable with being put in the position of believing the claims of Netanyahu and supporting his actions, especially if, from their perspective, God forbid, the outcome will assist them in the upcoming election.
Gideon, I mean, you heard there from Dan that Israelis are closer to the consequences, and Israel has taken a fair bit of a pounding during this war. You have the most sophisticated missile defense system on earth, Iron Dome, David Sling, THAAD, Arrow 2, Arrow 3, and yet the missiles have been getting through, and that hasn't dented public support for the war. Why do you think that is, even though where you are, Tel Aviv has been pounded, and just in recent days, the area around Dimona, where Israel has that not-so-secret nuclear site, has also been attacked and the missiles have got through?
Somehow, throughout years of brainwash, Israelis see the war as a force majeure, as something which was imposed on us and we can do anything about it, as the only open choice, as an earthquake. I guess that if it would have been an earthquake, God forbid, Israelis would react the same. What can we do? I mean, there is no alternative. We have to fight. We have to struggle. We have to run to the shelters 5-6 times a day. There is no other option. But the matter of fact is that in many cases, there is another option. And in any case, the war didn't bring Israel many achievements. We are now after 2.5 years of a very bitter war, including genocide in Gaza. 70,000 people paid on the other side in Gaza, in their lives, 1,000 babies. I don't have to mention all the figures here. They are known to your viewers. Did Israel achieve its goals after those 2.5 years? Is Hamas still in power? It is in power, live and kicking. So the question is not only if the war is justified. The question is also if it can reach all the goals that we put to ourselves.
Okay,
in Gaza,
Gideon, let me bring Alex in.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed. First of all, this did not address the question of why Israelis absorb all these missiles and still support the war. Israelis, like myself, basically thought that there was a peace process that was started by Rabin many years ago, and it failed. And we believed that there would be peace and quiet. And on October 7th, we saw the reality. So I'm really disgusted by Gideon Levy's focus on what happened in Gaza, because obviously Israel did not initiate that. And what's happening is that Israelis, yes, what happened on October 7th made Israelis much more determined, much more tolerant of losses, because we've seen how bad these attacks can be and how painful they can be. And actually what's happening in Tel Aviv is nothing compared to what's happening in the north, where Hezbollah is keeps firing missiles day and night. So it's really devastating. So the Gideon Levy sits in Tel Aviv and has fun because he's surrounded by all these brainwashed North Korean Israelis. This is a joke. When you think about the north, what's happening in Tel Aviv is really not so terrible. I mean, it is painful. And Israelis accept that, even though many Israelis, like the gentleman said before, many Israelis staunchly oppose Netanyahu and his party and his government. But because Israelis were so hurt by what happened on October 7th, and now they view Iran as a similar option, reoccurring, and that's why they are so willing to continue the war.
Dan,
they blame.
Yeah, Dan, if I on something that was just raised by Alex there, which clearly is what's going on, Israel's attack on Lebanon, which many human rights activists say is breaching the rules of war, that is not proportionate what is happening in Lebanon. Do you see that as a second front or a second war? Because in Lebanon, it is not a joint venture, a joint operation with the United States. It's Israel alone. If Trump tries to stop the war with Iran, does the war with Lebanon or with Hezbollah in Lebanon continue?
James, I think it's a little bit semantics, as if it's an extension or parallel or the same. It's related very clearly. In Lebanon, the war is not with Lebanon. The war is with Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is an extension of Iran. And Hezbollah is implacably opposed to Israel, and they've embroiled Lebanon in conflict with Israel. And basically, Hezbollah is at loggerheads with the government of Lebanon. The government of Lebanon wants Hezbollah disarmed. Joseph Aoun's government today basically took steps to essentially expel the Iranian representative. They've outlawed the IRGC. Israel is helping Lebanon get rid of Hezbollah, which has created a state within a state that is hostile to Lebanon. So I don't think we need to be naive about any of this.
With the greatest respect, Dan, I've not found many people in Lebanon who are saying what you're happening. The Lebanese people are not welcoming being bombed, are they, Gideon?
Well, by the way, I have.
Absolutely.
I speak to many Lebanese, and I can assure you they want Hezbollah gone.
Gideon.
Yeah, I guess Dan is right. They want Hezbollah done, but they don't want to see their country being destroyed one time after the other. Don't be wrong. With 1 million uprooted people from their homes, wandering around North Lebanon and not having a place to sleep, this does not exactly meet their dreams and does not make Israel more popular in Lebanon.
Gideon,
I mean, we really think
Gideon,
right
honestly,
now,
let me ask you, do you think Israel wants to displace 1 million Lebanese, or is this an aid of freeing Lebanon of Hezbollah? Is it just some crazy desire to oppress the Lebanese?
Yeah. Right now, there are 6 million people uprooted in the Middle East. 2 million in Gaza, 3 million in Iran, 1 million in Lebanon. You really think that this is legitimate? You really think that this will bring peace to the region? You really think that this will bring those
I think what's happened is that a lot of hostility has been created by Iran and its proxies, bringing about these wars in which all this misery has occurred. But I do not think even the current government of Israel, of which I am no supporter, wishes to displace anyone from anywhere. People overthink with Israel. Israel wants Hezbollah gone. Israel wants the Islamic Republic gone. And many Lebanese and many Iranians would welcome this.
The problem is that many believe what Israel is doing is not proportionate to what is coming from Hezbollah, and is causing huge civilian harm and war crimes taking place. And, Alex, we now have the finance minister of Israel, Bezalel Smotrich, saying that perhaps there should be a swathe of Lebanese territory, about 10% of Lebanon, everything south of the Litani River, taken permanently by Israel. That's about 1,000 square kilometers. That's bigger than Singapore.
I agree. We should completely ignore Bezalel Smotrich. He's really a zealot. I mean, for a long time, I had hoped that he would not be elected again. He's really radical, messianic. I mean, I cannot be negative enough about Bezalel Smotrich, his messianic ambitions, etc. But I can also not accept Gideon Levy's description of Israel as the great Satan creating refugees all over the Middle East, because this is so unidimensional. It's embarrassing to see an adult speaking in this way, that this big Satan creating refugees. What's happening in Lebanon is incredibly painful for Israel, in particular because it's the second time that it happened. And I have friends living on the border, and they've been displaced from their homes. They went back, and now they're facing exactly the same situation. So this is something that for a long time, Netanyahu, being the coward that he is, he believed that he would be able to contain that. But just by ignoring aggression...
We do need to go back to the beginning, don't we? To the 28th of February. Who started this war? And most of the world is hearing this narrative that Trump was bullied into
Lebanon.
this. No.
Hang on.
Most of the war started with an attack on Iran by Israel, and the narrative that everyone is hearing, and it's not being contradicted very much, is that Israel bullied the US into starting all this. It's now affecting the economy of the entire world. Isn't the world, who doesn't have many of those countries, a particularly good view of Israel right now, going to further be concerned and think that Israel is the troublemaker in this region?
I'm sorry. First of all, we were talking about Lebanon, and the fact that Lebanon attacked civilians in the north has very little to do with Israel attacking Iran. I mean,
well, some people would say it was a direct consequence.
But the fact, I'm surprised that you are justifying Hezbollah, which is a religious military movement in Lebanon, attacking civilians in Israel. There's no justification for that whatsoever. The next thing is you're talking about Israel bullying the U.S., which is an extension of what Gideon Levy said before. We've bullied Gaza, Lebanon, and Iran, and now we've bullied the U.S. I think it's also far-fetched.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We could go on with this discussion for a lot longer. I'd love to come back to you, Dan. I will next time, because we have you on this programme very regularly. Thanks to Alex Coman, Dan Perry and Gideon Levy. And thanks to you too for watching. If you missed any of our discussion, you can view it again anytime on our website, aljazeera.com. We'd like to hear your comments on today's issues or any other aspect of the war. Go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Or you can find us on X. There we are at AJ Inside Story. For now, that's it from me, James Bays, and all the team here. Stand by for Al Jazeera's continuing coverage of the war. More in just a moment.